So welcome to this edition of Chemistry Street Brain Radio. In my earlier episode, I talked about free will, and I argued that probably we are making the problem of free will, which is admittedly a difficult problem, but even more difficult than it actually is, because we want to protect ourselves. Realizing something deeply hidden about free will might actually unsettle our cognitive processes and make our existence unstable. So there's this possibility that we are choosing to stabilize our cognitive system by not referring to some very essential elements of the problem of free will. And that is an interesting possibility. And related to this, Colin Macken, the British philosopher, came up with this idea of cognitive closure. And Macken's argument was that some problems, probably, for example, the problem of consciousness, cannot be solved because we are cognitively limited and we are closed, so to speak, cognitively. And that was Colin Macken's idea. And it is certainly an interesting idea, although it'll be difficult to prove it. It'll be difficult to prove anything, unless, of course, you refer to the Gödel's theorem. And, even if you refer to the Gödel theorem, there are arguments that it doesn't really point to any practically important limitations of our reasoning power. So, so there are all these wonderfully fascinating arguments about the limits of our cognitive capacity. So, and, today I would like to argue about the possibility of selective cognitive closure. Meaning, we might actually selectively close our cognitive system because by that, we can make our cognitive system more stable. And what is more, probably evolutionarily speaking, significant is that we can probably make our cognitive system more efficient and productive, and in the game theoretic framework, more prone to win over your opponents. So let's suppose this is a fun game. Maybe we can think of a consciousness game and two opponents facing each other. One of them doesn't address the problem of consciousness at all. He or she just goes about the business of doing practical things about life, and the other asks the question of the foundations of consciousness all the time. Because it is arguably the single significant problems facing humanity. So it would be great if we could solve it. And, but when you think about it, when it comes to questions of everyday chores, like learning, doing business, communicating with people, and so on, it doesn't really pay to question the foundations of consciousness, does it? Nobody has made it his or her day job. I have been interested in the problem of consciousness for many, many years now, but I haven't made it my day job, to be honest, because I do practical things and during daytime. And I'm not saying that I investigate with consciousness in my spare time. I'm just saying that there are no demands for that, practically speaking. So in Tokyo, where I'm based, there are many media companies, television, newspaper, and so on. But categorically, these people are not interested in the problem of consciousness. They may pay a lip service to it, giving a nod, but it doesn't really become their principal concern. Of course, the problem of consciousness might sneak in from the back door, so to speak. So, for example, when you consider the foundations for happiness, longevity, anti-aging, and so on, you probably need to address the problem of consciousness. When you talk about creativity, the problem of consciousness might appear to be in the forefront. But otherwise, it's not really within the domain of the business to ask about the problem of consciousness. So, it does seem that, by, skipping asking the problem of consciousness, you can be more adaptive. So related to this issue of cognitive closure by choice, it is quite interesting to see that human beings are often not aware of the reasons why they have chosen a certain item. In the celebrated choice blindness experiments, human subjects are asked to choose among several multiple possibilities. For example, they were asked to choose which of the two faces were more attractive, and when they were given the erroneous choice, after they have made a choice, after some delay, the experimenter presents the subject with the other picture that was not actually chosen by the subject. The subject doesn't notice it. He or she believes falsely that was actually exactly the photo that was chosen by him or her. And when asked why they chose that particular face, they would give erroneous explanation, and that is called choice blindness. Because blindness means they are not aware of the original reason why they have made the choice. Because if they were aware of the reasons why they chose a particular subject, there will be a dissonance, and it would go against giving of explanation in different ways. So there's this really interesting phenomenon of choice blindness, and that might be related to the fact that when we make choice, we often do that in unconscious manner, and we are not necessarily aware of the reason why we have made that particular choice. Well, indeed, in most cases, we are not aware why we have made that particular choice. So this is the phenomenon called choice blindness, and it might be related to the subject that we are discussing now, cognitive closure by choice, by which we may say things about free will, why free will is difficult subject, and how we may not be able to decipher the enigma. And also when it comes to questions of consciousness, we may say that ostensibly that consciousness is blah blah blah. It's difficult because of this, because of that, and we believe that we have made the decision or judgment about these subjects, but deep down there might be something that is hidden, and that something might be a fear of self-negation, fear of unsettling self embodiment. If we come to any significant understanding of what consciousness or free will entails, we might actually be led to a situation where we come face to face with some really difficult, intractable realities of our existence, our mind, consciousness and existence, and the universe and everything. So I think this is probably something we really need to take into consideration when we argue about this cognitive closure by selection concept. By the way, I am running now because I think the traffic signal is going to change. I'm a runner. I ran in the Tokyo Marathon a week ago, exactly a week ago. But I am also occasional runner because I run when the traffic signal is going to change. So that's exactly what I did. In this case, I was aware of my motive. I ran because the traffic signal was going to change. But when I say probably it's difficult to solve the problem of consciousness, I don't necessarily realize what is involved in that. So anyway, so the traffic actually hasn't changed yet, so I didn't really have to run so hard. But what the heck? So yeah. Now, so I think so this is something that is very fundamental, something that is existential. This is an existential question. Nowadays, people talk about existential risks related to artificial intelligence, but I think that there are also existential questions about us, and one of them is, I think, questions about free will and consciousness. And so, anyway, so this is an existential question, but cognitive closure by selection, by choice, can occur in many things, I think. When we make our career decisions, I think we are not usually aware why we have made that career decision. In my case, I first took my PhD in physics department, and then I went on to study neuroscience, and then I went on to be interested in consciousness qualia. But I was not aware why I made this series of career decisions. I might have been in the financial sector. I might have been financially more successful if I did that. I might not be, talking into my iPhone like this in a poor man's attempt at emulating Lex Friedman podcast. But I might have had tens of staff working along with me, capturing my image with a really sophisticated camera. But that didn't happen because I haven't made that particular career decision. So, by the way, I am coming to a place where I need to give a public lecture again on education, so I'll probably stop recording here. Yeah, this is Sunday in Tokyo, but I work on Sundays too. It doesn't make any difference. So when cognitive closure by choice happens, I think it makes sense for the subject not to be aware of that, because to be aware that one is perhaps actively choosing to be cognitively closed, that knowledge alone would eat into one's conscience, so that one is less stable ethically, and also the fact that one is aware of possible extensions of one's cognition might actually destabilize the stable, cognitively closed state of mind. So, for example, if one is not aware of the fact that there might be hard problems of consciousness, then one would be able to stay within the functionalist or connectionist domain and do well, because at this day and age, for example, if you are oblivious of the fact that there are outstanding difficult problems of consciousness, probably then you could do well in artificial intelligence, because AI arguably is nothing but application of good old-fashioned ideas. There's no genius in AI. I'm sorry to say that, but probably that's true. And recently, I'm recording this on the 12th of March, 2023, and there has been recently an article by Noam Chomsky criticizing ChatGPT, of which everybody has been talking rather enthusiastically in the last few weeks. But needless to say, although the behavior of ChatGPT is something impressive, yeah, I'm running for the traffic signal again. It's not really something that would require a genius of mind. I mean, it's something that you do without much ado, and you simply don't require a lot of intelligence to devise a system like ChatGPT. So it would be great if you could be oblivious to more cognitively demanding problems of consciousness. So being cognitively closed by choice involves a kind of being a hypocrite. Soseki Natsume, the famous Japanese novelist who modernized Japanese novel writing, famously wrote about Mineko, a character based on the famous feminist Raicho Hiratsuka. And Soseki Natsume described Mineko as an unconscious hypocrite, which is great if, without sounding sarcastic, if you want to succeed in this world in a functional way. I think Mineko is a highly successful woman. I'm not saying this in a sarcastic manner, mind you. I mean, I'm not criticizing Mineko. Spare me from that. But I do think that there was something in it when Soseki Natsume described Mineko as an unconscious hypocrite, because that's something you could be. So it is night in Tokyo. I've been walking like a dog, and so I should be sleeping like a log. But before that, I need to finish this episode of Street Brain Radio. So we have been talking about the cognitive closure, especially when it is by choice. But I have argued that we are often not aware of the fact that we chose to be cognitively closed. And I think, this is in the spectrum of general illusion. Consciousness is an illusion. There's no doubt about it. Of course, to say that consciousness is an illusion doesn't really dispel the myth. Some people say that, by saying that something is an illusion, you can kind of discard that. But that is a really simplistic, oversimplistic, and ultimately stupid idea. When you say money is an illusion, it doesn't really mean that your life wouldn't be influenced by money. Of course it is influenced by money. When you say love is an illusion, of course we don't have an atomic table of a periodic table of love, but it doesn't mean that we don't feel love. We do feel love and we're moved by it. So when you say consciousness is an illusion, or something equivalent to that, it only means that you'd be moved by it. I think psychoanalysis, its tradition has shown that the more you are unaware of an illusion, the more your controls you would be. When you are not aware of the fact that something is an illusion, the controllability of it would reduce. I mean, you would be controlled by it rather than controlling it. So when you say consciousness is an illusion, unless you have a really great metacognition, you are controlled by it. Of course, all our lives are controlled by consciousness. We are concerned by it. We are sometimes too self-conscious to be free. And, consciousness often gets in the way of being really flexible. So to say something is an illusion doesn't really make us free from that. So coming to this cognitive closure thing, when you say we cannot do something, like when you say we cannot understand the origin of consciousness or the origin of free will, we are, very much influenced by that assumption. And that assumption of cognitive closure might be illusion. Illusion can be positive and negative. And when you have something like a hallucination, then it is a positive illusion. So that you would be seeing things, you would be hearing things that are not existent, and that is a positive illusion. When you have a negative illusion, you actually don't recognize something that is actually present. So, for example, when we actually have ability to solve the mind-brain problem, if we fail to see it, then it is a negative illusion. So, in the case of the cognitive closure about consciousness and free will, it is entirely possible that we actually possess an ability to do something about it, but we don't recognize it. So, as I argue that cognitive closures can contribute to cognitive stability, but at the same time, it can seriously hinder the ability to do things, and that can be a serious problem. Apart from our inability to solve the mind-brain problem, we wouldn't be extinct. The human beings wouldn't be extinct if we couldn't solve the mind-brain problem. But it will be such a disappointment if we, fail to find some practical solutions to it, because at the end of the day, when we are capable of doing something and we can't do it, that is in general a great disappointment. So I think one of the objectives of life is to get free, and to get free, you need to get free of illusions. What illusions? So I think it is important that we become aware of any delusions that we have, especially when you can actually do something, or you have the potential to do something, but you don't recognize that would seriously restrict your freedom. Having said that, I think it's certainly true that in some cases, as we have been arguing, that the failure to recognize one's potential ability can be beneficial in some cases because of this principle of fluency. In cognitive science, when you can do something fluently, with fluency, then you can do it efficiently. If you look at the brain activity, when you were versed in something like, for example, in mathematics, then when you're involved in mathematical thinking, your brain activity would be particularly reduced. You are in a energy saving mode, if you like, and you don't actually use that much energy in terms of neural activities, and that is in marked contrast to the case where you actually don't know what to do, and there's this abundance of neural activities and there's much energy dissipation. So contrary to the general idea that when you're deeply engaged in something that would require a lot of neural energy, you don't actually use that much energy when you are sophisticatedly engaged in something. So from that point of view, from that principle of fluency, if you can leave some untapped cognitive abilities, then you would be able to employ alternative abilities in sufficiently, well-developed manner so that your life would be well off. So it probably doesn't make any sense to pose any serious problems about consciousness or free will, because doing that might actually unravel some hitherto unknown possibilities for human beings. And the person who has successfully unraveled the secret of the universe in that respect would be, of course, highly regarded and would receive the highest recognition possible. But at the same time, it doesn't really make sense to tap into these abilities if doing that wouldn't contribute to your practical well-being, and for all likelihood it wouldn't contribute to your overall welfare. So the state of the matter is that we are living our daily lives, employing all these abilities that we can do fluently, because we have trained ourselves to do these things in our lifetime, and that is the basis of daily life, and that's how we walk. For example, I'm walking in Tokyo now, and I walk without paying much attention to how I do it. But of course, when I was a toddler, I presume used to pay quite a lot of attention to it, because otherwise I would have stumbled. So the fact that I can walk without any conscious involvement in that is a great thing. And actually, I might have some alternative ways of walking, like in the famous John Cleese city walk sketch. I might actually be walking in alternative manner, but I don't pursue that avenue of possibility, because walking like this is sufficient for me. And so to leave some cognitive abilities untouched is like walking. So all of us are actually probably sleepwalking in our daily lives, because we have chosen to cognitively close some aspects of our existence. And walking is great, but we might actually have alternative methods of mobility. And as the human society is moving towards developing new mobility techniques, like electronic cars, self-driving cars, and so on, I suspect that we human beings might actually be well advised to explore alternative ways of transportation, self-transportation in the metal space. We are accustomed to thinking in some manners, but the brave among us would venture off to pastures new, and by doing that, he or she would most of the time fail. and wouldn't be adaptive. Actually, the name of the game is that you try and stumble. That's the name of the game. You try and stumble most of the time, but only a few would make it, and that's all the reward one can get, and that's what makes life ultimately valuable, I think so. I think I will close this episode of Ken Mogi's Street Brain Radio pretty soon, and I will be making my closing statements. Problems about consciousness or free will are intractable, so they seem to be. But when and if we are cognitively closed, in the sense of Colin Markin, we might actually be choosing to do so, and we might not be aware of the fact that we are either unconsciously or consciously, or most probably unconsciously, choosing to negate some potential abilities of us, and that we are sleepwalking. But if sleepwalking makes your life efficient, maybe it's worth it. But as we turn into ever new eras of brilliance shed by the artificial intelligence technology, maybe we should develop new ways of mobility, not relying entirely on the principle of fluency, but stumbling on, muddling through until we find a really different phase of mental activity. So with that thought, I leave you in this episode of Sleep Brain Radio. Thank you for listening.